you. Thank you very much. Sorry I'm late. Didn't quite get the connection. Anyway, when was I here last? Is it last year or 2 years ago? No. More than that, really? Yeah. It just seems like it was yesterday. I'm trying to clear my brain so that I can make some sense. How many people saw the Star Trek movie? Now, is there any one thing that you objected to? I want a specific.
No Star Trek business. Chekov was not as cute as the original.
For anyone who didn't hear that, the biggest complaint we have about the most recent Star Trek movie was that Chekov was not as cute as the original.
Or the one.
The reason why I asked you, because I've heard from... Can you hear me? The reason why I asked is because I've heard from several people, much to my surprise, that the one moment they felt was intolerable was when Spock yells out, "Khan."
Spoilers.
So I guess the reason is it didn't feel organic to the scene. It felt manufactured. It felt like it was added on. I sensed that when I saw it, but it didn't really bother me. I thought the movie was really terrific, and I thought the ending was, or near the ending, it was really very touching. It knocks me out because when I've been going around to conventions and I've been comparing the first Star Trek movie to our films, or the best of our films, when I would bring up The Wrath of Khan, I'd say, we had those moments of extraordinary emotion and compassion, like when Spock is dying and Kirk is on the other side of the wall. And they took our one thing. That's incredible. Okay, anybody have any questions? I may be able to answer them.
If we could actually have people start lining up over here for questions, that would be absolutely great. I've got one to start out with, if you don't mind. I understand you're working on a new graphic novel called Things to Come. Could you tell us a little bit about what things may come of this graphic novel?
It's really, I've really purloined a title from H.G. Wells that was Things to Come. Something, things to come. So that's, I don't think of it though as stealing, I think of it as paying homage. The book is out. It's been published by a company called Blue Water. It's an interesting story. It's about vampires and human beings, the last humans on Earth, the first vampires, and how they overlap and how they come to be here, and the evolution from human to vampire, and the vampires are considerably different from, I think, anything that you've read, because they're very questioning. They want to know why they're here. And is this a curse? Because the human race has pretty much annihilated itself. Or are they supposed to rebuild? What does the future hold for them? So they're a very introspective group. And that's what I've chosen to make this story about. And it's out, as I say, it's called Things to Come. And I know you can get it on Amazon, but I think it's available in some comic book stores, and maybe Burns and... Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and before we get started with the questions, if I could just ask people, if you've got cameras, that's fine, but if the flashes could please be turned off in some way. It's getting a little bit much up here. And also, do be aware that Mr. Candy will be available for photo ops later.
Be aware.
With that, let's take.
So don't come by unless you want to get bitten.
Let's take the first question.
Okay, so my question, I thought I read on one of the Star Trek magazine interviews with you that when you first started filming the show, they were so interested in having you look like Davy Jones that they made you grow your hair out. Is that true? And also, did you have to wear a wig or anything in the first few episodes?
Yes, I did. I wore a wig in the first 6 episodes. I could have still gotten away with my own hair at that point. But they did want that long Davy Jones look, and that's the group of fans I felt they hadn't targeted as of yet, and so that's why they brought me in. I finally met Davy, very nice chap, but just a couple of years ago, and I can say this. I'm considerably taller than he is. But he is better endowed on top.
All right.
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, I was wondering how you felt about the portrayal of the new Chekov and about the actor who plays him. Can you tell us your thoughts on, do you think that Abrams' team has done a good job with the new Chekov?
Well, I think Anton Yeltsin is a very talented young man. He's done the title role in 2 or 3 movies. He doesn't need Star Trek. He's going to be able to move on and move up, on the basis of his talent, without any other generating force. I was very curious when I went to see it. I didn't know how I was going to react. I know that on occasion I have the capacity and the capability of acting in a very mean and and envious manner, and I didn't know if that would grab hold of me or what. And as soon as I sat down, I said, "Wait a second, this kid is 50 years younger than I am. I'm not competing with him." I had to tell myself that, though, because I'm a little nutsy that way. And so I was able to sit back and just enjoy the work. And he was very good. I thought he was very talented and funny, and a terrific addition to the cast. We met, I had already met him once before. We had met on the soundstage, and we talked for, I'd say at least an hour and a half. And it was delightful. So I was there. My wife and I went to the party afterwards. It was in a big parking lot. This was the first movie. And he's surrounded by people. And I'm walking on the periphery, and he jumps up and says, Walter, I've got my own action figure."
Come on up.
This is a very specific question about classic Trek, so the details are lost in time. But in the deadly years, Chekov has a line, skin sample Chekov, arrow sample, blood sample, tissue sample. One day, they will run out of samples.
That's why you came up here, so you could say that line.
In the English adaptation, which I assume was based on the script, the joke is different. After all the samples, he says, "You take so many samples, I'm not even sure I'm here."
I
like better. I'm wondering which you liked better, and if you could shed any light on how it got changed.
I'm embarrassed to tell you that I didn't catch that. I did not catch that in the second film. Boy, that's really dumb of me. I mean, it's something I should have been looking for. Which do I like better? Well, I'm an actor. I'm an actor. Mind me.
All right, come on up.
On a weekend like this, comparisons between Star Trek and Babylon 5 are probably inevitable, right? What I want to know from you is how do you compare the two shows, both from an actor's perspective and from a fan's perspective?
The second part is, I think, self-evident because we know how Star Trek has grown and developed over these last 40 years. And Babylon 5, I don't think is going to get any further than it is now in terms of popularity. And that, of course, isn't their fault alone. I mean, they did have another series ready to go, which would have enhanced the whole movement of Babylon 5, but they were canceled before they got started. It's easier for me to add to the first part. Now, I preface it by saying I'm enormously grateful to Star Trek. Without Star Trek, this wouldn't be happening. Without Star Trek, I probably wouldn't be an actor today. It's too tough a business. You got to have something going for you, unless you're an extraordinary talent, and you can carry that for decades. So I'm very, very pleased that I've had this opportunity, and proud, because Star Trek very often had some really neat things to say, and things that I agreed with. But Babylon 5 was a chance for me to do a little acting, you know? I mean, how many different ways can you say, aye, aye, sir, aye, aye, sir, aye, aye, sir? Yeah, and that grows old too, all that stuff. So every time Bester came on the show, he had something to do. He was a character that was involved in the plot, in the proceedings. He wasn't a peripheral character. He was important to how the story moved along. So that was terrific. I love that. I love being important to the story. And I don't know if you remember an interview very early on when Bill Shatner was introducing all of us to the press. It's caught for eternity on tape, you know, and this is a crude facsimile of how he did it. I can't. Oh, I'm not going to go down. I can't. She says, welcome the press. We're very pleased to have you here. And I'd like to introduce you to the cast. Over here is Nichelle Nichols, who plays Uhura. And over here is Jimmy Doohan, who plays Scotty. And over here is George Takei, who plays Sulu. And over here... the actor who plays Chekov. So there was a sense of anonymity. They went with playing the role, and it spreads in some way and becomes an accepted fact of life. So when they wrote for us and for me, they wrote, how do I put this? They wrote that as economically as they could. As a matter of fact, the thing that bothered me in this movie, this Into the Darkness film, was that Anton had not a lot to do. And it really kind of pissed me off, I'm living vicariously through him. And when he did speak, he was yelling. It was hard to understand what he was saying. So I'm already on another campaign to make sure that Chekov gets his due in the next one. Yes.
If you had to revision Star Trek in your image, what would that reimagining be?
how would you re-envision Star Trek if you were in charge of that?
If I was in charge of it? God, you're putting a deadly weapon into my hands. Well, I knew my place in that show, and I was content to do what they gave me to do until they stopped going forward with it. We got scripts where each of the supporting characters was, if not prominently displayed, was certainly a force in the story. And then they come onto the soundstage, and they start crossing things out. And if they didn't cross them out, Bill would make sure that when they were shot, that the focus of attention was otherwise. Was turned so all I would have wanted in that situation is to get a chance to do everything that they had written for me. They hadn't written that much for me, but at least to do that. I mean, I was incredibly grateful to be involved in it. But at the same time, I was frustrated enough to consider leaving after the second season. Because I was bored. The yellow button is for if you're afraid, and the red button is for anger, and the blue button is if you're depressed. And those buttons didn't even move, And in fact, I left for a month in the second season to do a play. I did a play outside of Chicago. I had a great time. Played Jackie Coogan. I don't know how many of you folks know Jackie Coogan. But it was great fun, and I had a really splendid time. And I learned a lot that I was able to use thereafter, working with him. But I missed 3 episodes. But as I say, I thought the trade-off was really very fair because I got a hell of a lot more to do. Somebody else?
So Chekov, Bester. So a couple of questions. First, was there another character that you played, or what was your inspiration to come up with that evil character, Bester, with a heart of coal? And what did you do? I mean, I heard Peter Jurassic say one time that he said, to get into character, he would say, "My dear Mr. Cannibal." Was there anything special that you did to get into character to play Bester?
Well, I used that same line. No, I'm naturally a prick, and it was very easy. Now, each part comes with its own. You tap into something in you, hopefully, and it's the more different the characters you play, the more you search or you look for other aspects of your personality that that equip you to play that role. My belief is that you never pretend. You're up there having full support for that character you're playing. When I played Bester, I didn't editorialize. I didn't say he was a bad guy. I said, well, Bester is looking out for his people. He has a tremendous loyalty. And I found the positives to make me like him. Because if I didn't like him, the audience wasn't going to, respond. And I know they didn't respond positively all the time, but once in a while they respond. So I needed to do that to get the truth of the character. I played on the stage I played God as a Puerto Rican towel attendant in a steam bath. Different character. I played a CIA agent who was literally falling apart on the battlefield in another show. And when I say literally, I mean everything was falling off. Hey, look what I have here. You can imagine what I had there. So did I answer it at all? No.
There's a little Bester involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm
God, you don't look thrilled at all.
Mr. Koenig, I have a question and a request. Number one, are you jealous that Howard Stern gave Sulu his own dance and you don't have one?
He gave him his own dance?
Sulu dance.
On the radio? Well, how does that work? He's dancing on the
It's
radio.
to the tune of the safety dance by Men Without Hats that came out about 30 years ago. You can dance if you want to. Go on YouTube. You can YouTube it.
Oh, it's on YouTube. Okay.
And
No, not particularly.
well, he just let all the air out of my sails with that one. I can tell you a happy man if you'll say my favorite line from Star Trek.
Can you tell me where the nuclear vessels are?
I've always been a fan if they put things in our ears myself.
Good morning. You touched on it a little bit, the fact that Chekov didn't get to do a lot of the push buttons that didn't work. But I know George Takei pushed to make Sulu eventually a captain of his own ship, and I know he's been working on that since I think Star Trek 2. And Chekov was first officer of another ship in Trek 2. I found it curious that he never sort of tried to move up the hierarchy again. Did you push for Chekov to get more to do with the films? Or
No. What I did was occasionally I'd stop in at Gene's office and say, "How about this line?" You know. I remember doing that in which was the one? Was it the first movie that where I got my ear got not my ear something got burned, right? My arm got burned. Yeah, I offered a couple of lines which he used. You know, George has some extraordinary characteristics, personality. He got the short end a lot of the time, up until he became the captain. In one case, he had a very nice scene in the voyage home, and they had a very mean little kid who was supposed to act opposite him. And no, I don't want it. So all day they were trying to get this kid to coax him to do the scene, which was a really nice scene, which as a matter of fact was my invention. And the scene was that he meets this kid and finds out that he's the great grandson of this boy. Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Yeah. And he took it very stoically. You know, he didn't get to do it. Took it stoically. In Star Trek 3, I think, he was supposed to be promoted, and for reasons not controllable, they didn't do it. They had a scene in the shuttlecraft where he gets promoted. It was cut out. So he went through some stuff, you know, and he missed the first 10 episodes of the second year of the series because he was doing Green Berets. I'm sure he would have rather been working with Bill Shatner than John Wayne. So I really admire the fortitude and the character. I would have been weeping and complaining and beating my breast. Why not me? Why not me? But so I was pleased for him when it finally happened. When they finally took note of the fact that he was there and that he was a deserving actor, and gave him something to do. I thought that was only appropriate. So, no, and the other thing is, you know, you can be the captain, you can be the admiral, and it can be a part not as good as the guy who is an ensign and sitting in the lockup. You know, I could be in the lockup with the brig with you know a soliloquy. You know, and that would make it for me. I mean, I wouldn't need anything else for that, you know. Oh, this time in my life when things are going so bad, but I remember, you know. So it was No, I never equated rank with the value of the role.
Welcome back to Phoenix. Do you know if there's ever going to be a re-release of Moontrap? Campbell, come on.
Yeah, well, yeah. You think that with Bruce Campbell's name and how popular he has become, that somebody would do that. There was a lot of political stuff going on with that. The people who made Moontrap, by the way, my wife here was in it. For some peculiar reason, the people who made Moontrap had the rights to the second not release, the second. Say it for me. What?
Installment?
Yeah, okay, that's a good enough word. The second installment, not the first. The company that released it had the rights to the first one. And they got scared and decided they didn't want to do it. They didn't think it would make enough money for them. But there can't be a third one without a second one. So they never got back the rights to do another Moontrap. And they had one on the boards. They had the story, and it was pretty good. But that's one of the peculiarities of this business. Things happen. Some things happen in order and logically, but more often than not, people's lives and their careers and everything else seem to be capriciously plotted. You know, things that should have happened don't, and things that shouldn't have happened do. You know, and you have to go with it. That's why I tell actors, you know, people who want to be actors, I say you gotta be ready for disillusionment and disappointment and, you know, and demoralization, the three big D's, because there's no real logic to how things go. Particularly for actors who get a break early on. Some of them, you know, deserve it, and some of them probably don't. But that's the business. You gotta be able to live with that. Okay, somebody else.
Back before the first picture was even announced over here in Phoenix, you've always been just super nice to us. We appreciate that. And now that I know the question, I'm almost afraid to ask this question. But the guy who said some awful nice things about you on the Bob and Tom radio show, what is Jimmy Pardo really like?
Oh, he's a great guy. Jimmy Pardo's my son-in-law. He's married to my daughter, Danielle Koenig, who's currently writing Disney cartoons, a new Disney cartoon for the studio. He's a very nice guy. He's very pleasant. He's you know, that whole thing when he kind of, you know, takes on the audience and gets smart out. That's all an act. I'm very pleased that he's in the family.
Well, certainly, no one can compare to the original cast of Star Trek. But I wanted to know, in your view, what is the greatest legacy to the entire genre of sci-fi for the original series and cast?
Legacy for the public, or legacy for them, or what do you mean?
Legacy to the public, maybe to the cast as well.
Well, you know, I think that probably has changed a little. We're in another decade, and we're looking for different things on the screen. We're looking for eye candy. You know, we're looking for action. We're looking for spectacular effects. And sometimes, as a consequence, the story suffers a bit in terms of the message. You know, not all of our films, not all of our episodes carried a profound socio-political message, but a lot of them did. And I was always very proud of that. I always felt that very pleased to be associated with that. So if you ask today's audience, the young people who are making this, make the first weekend of this movie, a $70 million weekend, they'll probably answer it in a different way. They'll talk about the excitement and the adventure and not emphasize the things. We emphasize those things, the philosophical things, because we didn't have for one reason, we didn't have the equipment, we didn't have the wherewithal to make it visually spectacular. So we relied on telling good stories, and I think maybe that's ultimately what we'll be known for. The fact that the Star Trek, the original Star Trek series and films told good stories. Stories that were emotionally provocative or involving, that were intellectually stimulating.
Every actor I know says that you never play a villain as a villain. So I'd like to hear what makes Bester a hero. What makes him a good guy? What's his vision for a better world? And the second part of my question is, if you ever read the Cyborg trilogy, do you feel like they captured your heroic Bester in that?
Let me answer the second part first. I read the first one. Bester is born on the last page, so there's not much of Bester in that, The second one was very episodic. It felt like 3 television episodes put together. And it was okay. It was okay. The third one I thought was really interesting. It made him a little bit more vicious than I had intended. But it was really well done. It was an absorbing story, and I had a great time reading it. Now, what was the first part?
What makes Bester a hero?
Well, it's
What's real motivation?
well, I think his loyalty to his people. Anybody who stands up, for a group, it's loyalty in a way not to destroy the world or their universe, but to make it more palpable for his people. Now, whether you think his people are good or bad, it is a righteous idea and a righteous motivation. So I think that's what it is. And I can relate to that. So to me, that's how I go.
Hi, Walter.
Hi.
As Bester, working on Babylon 5, you had a lot of really amazing actors around you. Some of them you got to work with, some of them you didn't. As Bester, was there any character that you wished you had gotten to interact with, but didn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sure. Oh, you. Well, I think it would have been fun interacting with Peter and Andreas. Yeah. In fact, all of the folks. As you say, they were good actors, and I'm thinking that if I was interacting with them, it would have been a scene that had its own identity. Because why would Bester be working with these folks unless it was, something unusual? That there's lots of reasons for him to interact with Bruce. There's all that conflict going on with Jerry Doyle. But the other actors, yeah, it would have been fun.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I was actually wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about Star Trek Renegades that you're working on for us. What role it is with that.
Well, I've read the script, and I understand that there's been a pretty significant overhaul since I read it. It's too long, so they had to cut out. And one of the things that they cut out, one of the things that I was not particularly fond of, was all the fight scenes. It seemed like the script was geared to attract, very young people who want to see, crashes and fights and things like that, and relying on that more than on story. Now I understand they have deleted 6 fight scenes from the movie, so that I think that'll help it just on that basis. I think it's a kind of an interesting story. Chekov is the head of the Federation or something. He's 140 years old, and he's trying to keep the peace, and he knows that there's an insurrection going on, and he's trying to keep things together with Tim's character. What's his name? Yeah. So, and then there are bad people. They're kind of colorful. So I think if people start comparing it with this movie, it's going to have a very tough time with all the effects. They're obviously trying to do more effects in Renegades than they have in the past, but this movie is going to take Into the Darkness is going to take a lot of expertise and genius to upstage that. Okay.
You have a new graphic novel, but do you have any plans for the future, any other future endeavors? Anything you'd like to check off your list?
Bucket list, huh?
For anyone who didn't get that groan-inducing pun, the question is, do you have anything to check off your list?
I don't know. I'm at an advanced age, and it's hard to think too far into the future, particularly if you have a Russian soul and you feel that the world's going to come to an end pretty soon anyway. So I literally try to take one step at a time, see what today brings, whether today will give me an idea that I can start working on tomorrow. It's hard for me to project into the future. It's hard for me to make long-term plans. So right now I'm sort of at sea. I don't know really what I'm going to do next. And I really need to get started on something. Because when you get older, and I'm sure it's true for younger people too, work can be the healthiest thing you have at your disposal. If you just sit around and you wait for something to happen, and you feel sorry for yourself, and you see the clock is ticking, that's very debilitating. And it can actually, I'm sure it could result in an early demise. So, working, and I have to find something that I can do, that I can involve myself in, that I can be, that I can look forward to each day to doing. I've done a couple of short, films. I did one called Handball, which ran about 7 minutes, and that's on YouTube. And then Judy and I were in a very short film called Flashback, but made by a very, very competent director. And that's also on YouTube. So I'm open to doing things even of that scale, as long as they're interesting and as long as I can get involved in it. Oh, by the way, I'm doing another one right now called Cowboys and Engines. And it's one of those... Yeah, what is it? Steam pump. Steam. Yeah, it's one of those.
Considering the fact that you don't naturally speak with a Russian accent, did you ever get any kind of backlash or critiques or criticism from the accent that you use on Star Trek?
Yes. Curious, when I was doing the television series, not so much. You know, once in a while I'd get a student. I mean, a student would be, a language student would be in the audience who was taking Russian, and it was generally a young woman for some reason. And she would say, you know, your accent is off because there's no W in the Russian language, and you keep using that. And the answer to that is, people, I think the answer is that people who speak Russian and try to speak English get a little confused with the V and the W, and they invert them. That's what my father did. My father did that exact same thing when he talked to us. Please pass the vegetables, you know, that's where he was. So I took my cue from that, although I did have one experience that was funny in retrospect. I was at a convention and 2 or 3 young women came up to me and said, we just want to tell you how much we love your accent. It is so wonderful. I said, okay, you don't like the accent? You don't have I get the picture. You don't have to make fun of it. And they looked at each other and said, what are you talking about? We're from Soviet Union.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you very much for Star Trek, Gods and Men, and for Star Trek Renegades. Those are Star Trek as it was meant to be.
Thank you. I do think there's room for more than one interpretation of Star Trek. After all, this is another decade. It is 40 years later. The way we make movies changes, you know. The emphasis is on special effects and the adventure. As I said before, if we had those CGI effects available to us, I'm sure we would have been tempted to rely on them more. So I don't think anybody should, out of hand, you know, conclude that this Star Trek isn't as good or isn't as consistent or what's the word? No. Starts with a C. Yes, it is in the canon that our stuff was. Just accept it for what it is and enjoy what you can get out of it and remember the good old days and you know, have that as part of your memory and your fondness for Star Trek. But give yourself the opportunity to enjoy the new stuff too. Well, Galaxy Quest was great fun. I really enjoyed it. That was a nutty experience. And some of it was so painfully true. You know? When they're sitting there signing autographs, you know. Oh my God, did that bring back memories? I didn't bring back memories. It's yesterday. It's what I was doing yesterday. I thought it was ingeniously plotted. I thought everybody did a terrific job. They gave you just a touch of Star Trek. I mean, the leader had his shirt off several times, I think. And the guy who's, I can't remember, the Englishman, yeah, his grumpiness, you know, that is something that we've all, weathered and had to deal with. So, yeah, I thought that was terrific. What other movie were you talking about?
That's mostly the Galaxy Quest and the
Yeah, it was fun. I had a great time with it.
Quick question. First, which is your favorite scene as Bester?
Okay.
And the second one is, you recently did that Star Trek Phase 2, Serve All My Days, where you apparently died.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? You probably need a role for that.
Okay. How much time do we now have?
We got about 5 minutes or so.
Okay. My favorite scene as Bester. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Probably the scene with Jerry in the train. Yeah. And what do I think of the episode, the computer? Yeah. Well, you know, those folks came to me and said, would you be willing to partake in this? I said, well, if we can come up with a story that I'd like to tell, something that we haven't done yet. And I actually have a friend in England who said, what about the Deadly Years? What about doing a sequel? Sequel? That was the word I was trying to think of. What if we do a sequel to Deadly Years? And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea because it would give us more of an involvement and give us more of a, geez, see what's happening? I'm losing it. More insight into what Chekov was, because I said generally it was, you know, I'd sit at the navigator's position and say, Captain, there's something strange out there. What do you think it is? And then he'd go. Take it away, Bill. Talk about Bill and I get so excited. So yeah, this is a chance, you know, to go through the 5 steps of dying, you know. Denial, anger, denial, coming to some kind of grips, you know, with it, you know, acceptance. And we put all of that into it. And I thought, well, we now have an idea of, I do at least, have an idea of what this character is about. And so I felt a considerable amount of satisfaction having the opportunity to do that.
I think we have time for one more.
I want to congratulate you on your star.
Oh, thank you.
If there is a role you would like to play, Babylon 5, Dragon Trek, or anything, what would it be? What would be the dream role that you would like to play?
I don't know. No, I don't.
Happy the way you did it?
The way I did it?
The way all the points you have to happy with those?
No, I would love to have done more things. Obviously, you know, my wife gets very upset when I talk about this particular instance. But they were doing this was about 8-10 years ago. They were doing a 2-part movie of the week called Helter Skelter. And it was about Charles Manson and his followers. And they couldn't find anybody in Los Angeles to play the part. And then I came in and I did a couple of things that they told me not to do. They told me not to try to imitate his accent and not to and not, I don't know, something else. And I did just the opposite. I came in and the director, who, you know, really didn't see me in the part to begin with, but because a couple of casting directors had come to my defense and that he should hear me read, he said, okay, come back and read it. And I said, can I take a minute? I was in the room with him. And he said, sure. And he started to write something, to himself. And while he was writing, I started talking. So the first impression he got was of my voice. And I had done a pretty good job of imitating Charles Manson. So he was a little spooked. And when he looked up and said, my God, that's Charles Manson. That's Charles Manson. And I thought, he said, just hold on, let me see what I can do about this. Let me see what I can do about this. So I left, and I really was on cloud nine. I thought, wow, this is an opportunity to do something that's really substantial, to get away from the Star Trek thing, and certainly at least to give me the opportunity to carve a different kind of career. And, well, as most of you must know, I didn't get it. A director named Elia Kazan in New York, who was one of our most preeminent directors. He directed Streetcar Named Desire, and he directed what? Yeah, Facing the Crowd, and several other really important movies. He knew this kid, Steve Railsback, and he wrote a note on Steve Railsback's behalf, and that was a fait accompli. That was the end of the story. I would have loved to have done that. I would have loved to have, see if I had the chops to really carry it off. My wife was concerned because people involved in the production were getting threatening letters. We're gonna cut your throat, So she wasn't terribly pleased about my involvement in that. We should end on that note. So let me very briefly tell a story I've told before, but it should be a happier note. 8 or 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, maybe 15, God almighty, it might have been 20 years ago. It was a long time ago. I had an operation on my knee. And the doctor told me it was going to be a snap. It was going to be arthroscopic surgery, not very invasive. I'd be up on my feet in 24 hours, and I'd only be under for about 30 minutes. So I went into the operating room thinking that this was the situation and feeling fairly relaxed and okay with it. And as a matter of fact, it was much more difficult than I expected. It was a 2-hour operation, and I didn't get back on my feet. I was on crutches for about 6 or 7 weeks. Now, in the operating room was an anesthetist who was a big Star Trek fan. So, as the anesthesia is wearing off, and I'm beginning to be aware of the world coming out of dreamland, the first thing I hear is, I got a wee bit of bad news for you, laddie.